Hey y'all, welcome to episode 3 of 5D Tea Time. I'm your host, or one of them, I should say, Lindsay Love, and this is
Crystal Kristen.
So the concept of 5D Tea Time is for us to basically talk about topics that are related to 5D or topics that are kind of coming up in our lives currently that we want to discuss, dive into, transmute the energy of. So before we started the video today, we had a quick check in on the energies that we've been feeling and came up with a topic that is somewhat in both of our energies right now. So we thought it might be a good one to deep dive into. The topic that we were discussing is this concept of overwhelm. So just as you know, as well as we do, life these days is busy. We are continuously bombarded with energies and challenges and things to do list. I mean, the list can go on and on and on.
Information, tons of information, overwhelm. Yeah.
Exactly. Emotional overwhelm, mental overwhelm, physical overwhelm, a lot of challenges with sickness and things these days. So there's a lot that can hit us. And overwhelm is very easy to slide into if we allow ourselves to. And we just wanted to kind of dive into the concept of how to transmute overwhelm today. But first talk a little bit in depth about overwhelm, how to transmute it, and then how ultimately the transmutation of it is a choice. So we always have a choice to choose what direction we're going to move or how we're going to cope or deal or process a situation, so on and so forth. So we'll dive into that. But Kristen, first, can you just kind of describe a little bit about overwhelm that maybe you've experienced or we just experience in general in our culture?
Well, generally, I think, not personally speaking right now, but generally, I mean, what I have experienced in my life is a lot of times there's overwhelm when there's this sense that I need to keep up with something. Like I need to keep up with this pace that somehow is like arbitrarily like imprinted into my brain, or that I've seen it, or somehow this modality of productivity and what I'm doing with time and how productive I am in time, based on other people's models of living, right? There's this sense of like, if I get caught up in this like artificial timeline that somehow I've like superimposed upon myself, that somehow it's maybe I've liked the way a certain person is doing a thing, and then I like try to implement the way they're doing it, but it causes me overwhelm because it almost like dysregulates my natural way of processing and my natural rhythm. That can slip me into overwhelm. So if I'm like outperforming what actually my energy level can manage, that can be overwhelming, or can give me that sense of like anxiousness and overwhelm, I would say. What I'm experiencing personally right now is I'm kind of in a growth challenge, I would say. I continuously sign up for trainings that kind of challenge my growth, teachers that hold a space of a space of kind of spiritual knowledge, and I'm like, and to really be in that growth space of embodying new tools and new techniques, there's a stretching that happens that sometimes I'm like, whoa, I'm growing. It's almost like growing pains. And it can feel like whoa, I'm gonna bust at the seams. Like if I if I don't, I'm just like hitting the edges or like getting bigger and wider and taller, just like when we're teenagers, when we're kids, we would get growing pains. Sometimes those growing pains feel like overwhelm. Sometimes when I'm like kind of being like stretched to a maximum level that I haven't been stretched before. So that's kind of like where I was experiencing overwhelm a bit recently, like, whoa, I'm at capacity. I'm at capacity and I just need to like, yeah, we can talk about what we do, how we transmute that. But for me, that's kind of the two pieces, like just generally keeping up with an outside rhythm that's not truly mine. And then right now it's a growth challenge that's creating an overwhelm that doesn't feel necessarily unhealthy, but it's still like it's an edge that's there. It's like, whoa, okay, I just need to like relax a bit. So
Okay.
that's how it's showing up for me right now. How
I
about
love
you?
that
Yeah.
because what you said was it's not necessarily unhealthy. And that's so true because I think that overwhelm can be, of course, there's a spectrum with it, with anything, but I feel like overwhelm can be quite healthy because it pushes us to our edges, it pushes us to grow, it pushes us towards change because ultimately growth is change, right? So whether it comes on any level, I think it gets dialed back to this concept of change. And then there's also the unhealthy pieces of it where the overwhelm is impacting us on numerous levels where it's actually our last episode was about disempowerment versus empowerment. It's actually disempowering us. It's siphoning energy because we can't process clearly with the mindset. Emotionally, we might feel overwhelmed. There might be a physicality to it, a physical outcome as well, the heart beating really fast, being in the sympathetic nervous system. So kind of that like flight or fight or freeze mode, the releasing of hormones such as cortisol and what's the other one?
Adrenaline.
Thank you very much. And so it's interesting that you say healthy and unhealthy because that really just brought up a lot in my mind of course there are spectrums to everything, right? And so overwhelm oftentimes has this negative connotation associated with it, but actually it can be quite a beneficial thing. But knowing the difference between the two, and ultimately to do that, I think one needs to know thyself. So is this moment of overwhelm that I'm in actually a positive one that's pushing me to grow? And am I kind of in control of not moving into, the actual negative pieces of it? Or is it, a negative one, and being able to recognize, or sorry, an unhealthy one. So being able to recognize the difference between the two within oneself. Because like you were saying before, one person's process might not align with another person's process. So like you were saying, if you see one person doing something a certain way and they're quite successful at it, and that's their way of doing things, if you maybe try to transition into their way, it may not suit your flow. So I think it all comes back to knowing thyself and knowing where that line is when we cross from healthy overwhelm into unhealthy overwhelm.
Yeah, because healthy overwhelm in a sense is like, it feels like there is an active choice, like, oh, like I want, like you're choosing the growth, you're choosing the change. Change isn't like thrust upon you and it's like, no, I want this moment, I've chosen this, you know, path. I've chosen, there is like a personal alignment to it. And there's a sense of like knowing personal boundaries, like, is this strengthening my system? Is this like really buffing me out to like become a diamond, you know? Or is this toxifying me and am I becoming like immune susceptible now to, am I weakening my immune system by, you know, brain draining myself out, physically draining myself out, emotionally draining myself out to just keep up with this habituated thing that I'm just somehow like doing, and I don't even know why I'm doing it. I'm not connected to it. So like healthy overwhelm feels like there's a real like still like there's a connection, and I can feel it's like going to the gym and like pumping, you know, the thighs. I don't actually do that, but okay, going on a run, we'll say that. Like, oh, you know, okay, I'm gonna slightly overwhelm my system by taking on an extra hill because like I feel like I'm choosing that, there's an alignment to that, and like my thighs, my lungs can handle it today, you know, but it's gonna push me, you know, there's like an edge. It's like, whew. And then like unhealthy overwhelm would be what, like the coach still drilling me from middle school, like, you got to do it, you got to, you know, push yourself, push, you know, what, and it's like, it's coming
20
from
more minutes or whatever.
it's like, you know, make that mile under 7 minutes or whatever. It's like, what?
Yeah, and then you can't walk the next day or you're injured because of it.
Yeah. Or, you know, then it's, yeah, exactly. So it's like, I feel like healthy overwhelm comes from like an inspired, active internal space. An unhealthy overwhelm comes from some sort of invisible hierarchy that's pressurizing the system to do something that's just not intrinsic to itself. So I feel like there's a distinction there, but you're right, like know thyself. There's a personal cultivation to even be able to identify distinctions in what outside pressure and top-down pressure. Like, are we still listening to the authorities from our childhood in our behaviors in our adult life? And like, of course we are, you know, if we haven't done the deprogramming and, you know, the like all of that subconscious processing that, you know, I know both you and I do in our work. So yeah, I think it's just, where's the voice, like what's the quality of the voice inside, like who is that voice inside, and yeah, what voice are we listening to? You know, so yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we could go so deep into it because also, you know, a lot of it, when I say know thyself, comes back to the empowered self and not seeking elsewhere for answers, not seeking outside of ourselves for answers.
Yeah.
Not necessarily looking to another or societal norms in order to fit into that cookie cutter mold, right? It's really, like you said, the deprogramming, like kind of breaking down everything that we were taught and learned, and really knowing thyself from within, and then rebuilding that idea of, okay, where does my growth lie? And where do I move into states of overwhelm? How is my nervous system functioning? Is it more sensitive at certain times? And is it less sensitive? So these are all things that can't be sourced from outside of ourselves. Yeah, we can get support, of course, from friends and doctors or experts or all of these things, but
affirmations, you know, or you know, affirmations, you know, that we put in our house. I mean, but really it's got to come from like a deep inner knowing.
and I would even go as far to say that inner knowing is being connected to source, whatever you view source as, right? God, the universe, Buddha, so on and so forth. I mean, it's kind of infinite in a way, but that connection is where knowing thyself becomes the foundation of knowing thyself is even stronger via that connection. So I guess for time's sake and time purpose or purposes of kind of being mindful of time, let's kind of move forward into this idea of transmuting overwhelm. So for instance, if you personally or just in general feel that the overwhelm that's being experienced is starting to move more into the unhealthy side of the spectrum. How can that be transmuted, first recognized, then transmuted, in order to move more towards the positive side of the spectrum, the healthy side, which is more where exists more in the 5D?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I have an example of something that happened last night. I had a lot of sessions in a row, and I found myself in a session as the sun was setting, and I could feel my energy was dropping. I could feel, and I was like, what's available right now? Like, as I'm giving a session, like, how can I support myself more in this moment where I can feel myself starting to slip into the unhealthy overwhelm? And it was just, I mean, I was perfectly positioned, thankfully, to just bask in this light of the sunset. It's like, I'm just going to completely receive here right now, as this person's receiving this healing, but I put myself in the receiver seat completely as well. And amazingly, as I was doing that more and more, the other person was receiving more and more. It didn't become less. It was like the field of resource energy just widen and broaden. I could just kind of rest into it. And I was like, all the tension just dissipated out of my head, out of my body. And I was like, all is well. We're completely taken care of, by this kind of universal order. Like, I don't have to do much right now. There's nothing I need to like do or change or fix or control. Like, it's all being taken care of. And just like you were saying, it's like kind of like tapping into source. It's tapping into that greater intelligence, the great mystery. I love how the First Nations people here like would speak of like the great spirit, or that great mystery. But it does find order when we can just kind of get out of the way of that natural organizing to happen. So for me, it's like, what natural element can I tap into? Like, if I'm on my computer too much and I'm, just like, I need to just move my eyes out and just really connect with this tree out here, just to like bring me back in, and maybe hold my gaze for a couple minutes or a few minutes. It's like resourcing life back in, and just like letting that come in to like soothe and bring a natural order in. A lot of times overwhelmed too, I'm like, am I hydrated? It's like, let's stop, look, and listen. Like, am I hydrated? Have I eaten? There's some certain system checks also. But there is this food of intelligence, this infinite intelligence that just surrounds us and wraps everything. And if we can just rest back into that more, that overwhelmed state does dissipate. And then it becomes like, kind of back into the healthy zone for me.
Yeah, the thing that's coming up for me is this need for control. When it's healthy overwhelm, that need for control doesn't really seem like it's there. It's kind of the excitement more so of, there's this goal in mind, or there's this thing that I'm working towards, and it feels great. And although moments it's uncomfortable, the expansion or the growth or the change, it doesn't feel like that need to like grasp so tightly and control it to where a lot of times there is a physical reaction. It does feel more in the flow. And the negative overwhelm, I relate that a lot to I notice I just go in moments of control, and control equals contraction. So I can kind of feel it in my body, right? I can feel it in my mind too, but it's easier to describe in the body. Contraction, it's like I'm kind of rounded in the shoulders, like my jaw might be clenched a little bit. My hands aren't, my fingers aren't wiggly and loose. Your fingers, no, they're more like clenched, and just in general, things feel tighter, you know?
Yeah.
And so just recognizing when that happens within me, and then coming back to the relinquishing of control, which was kind of like what you were saying, just letting go. But I think the only way to do that is to, again, know thyself, but be able to recognize it. So it requires a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because if there's no self-awareness, we will just live our lives in this perpetual state of overwhelm.
Yeah.
And then we look at like the amount of disease and sickness and challenges in our society in particular. And yes, there are numerous variables when discussing those factors, and we won't get into those today, but something specific that comes to mind is stress. And where does stress come from? Stress is a direct link to overwhelm. And when we're in overwhelm, we want to control, the body contracts. So it's all linked. And I guess recognition would be the first level of transmutation for me, because we can't change anything unless we're aware of it. So self-awareness, then recognition. And then an immediate tool that comes to mind, just in moments of like acute moments, like this is happening right here, right now. Of course, chronically, there can be other strategies, but this is happening right here, right now, is the breath. And I loved what you said of like nature, you know, looking out the window, or even self-care is another one that comes to mind. But something that's going to transition a person out of the mind, the present environment, and almost reposition them into just reposition them into the 5D. I mean, for lack of a better word, like by connecting with nature or the breath or the very like salt of the earth foundational parts of life.
100%. Yeah, the breath, it brings us back. It brings us back into the body. The breath brings us right back into, and yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything you're saying. It is like almost like the contraction of the overwhelm narrows, contracts. You know, we see a lot of like this posture, you know, people's like heads protruding out and collapse the diaphragm in our modern world. And yeah, when we can take the pause, it's just like taking that pause. I mean, a lot of people, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, I mean, I don't know if people still do this. I guess they probably do, but like taking smoke breaks, you know, like that was a totally legit thing, you know, to do. And it's like, well, why, like, let's take breath breaks. Like, why not? Like breathing breaks. And actually just like revitalize the system and yeah, ground back into the physical body, like bring the head, reattach the head into the body through the breath, and widen the field and deepen, elongate the field. And then there's so much more possible here, like so many more solutions are in the field that like the narrow constricted mind can like obsesses over what's right in front of itself, and it doesn't see that there's this like whole other field of potential like resources that can come in to assist that moving through. And our society is, particularly in the United States, I would say, particularly, is, a very adrenalized place. It is a very work and productivity, time is money, money is time kind of thing. And so it is, it's like, very external oriented, you got to, produce and like show for your time, to be like a validated human, and that, I mean, that's a collective consciousness that's really like an unconscious drive that's behind so much of the doing. Perfectionism, I hear you talk about that too, like that's a piece too, that it needs to like, and again, it's perfectionism, such an interesting thing, because it's like we've seen the way our parents do it, or we see the way other people do it, and there's this like order and control that I think is like intrinsic, like there's this like spiritual alignment with like perfection that is already here. And then there's like the mental overdrive for perfection, which can also lead into overwhelm. So it's not like any of these words like overwhelm or like perfection are like intrinsically negative, it's just like, where is the drive coming from? And a lot of it's so subconscious that we, if we're still living out, ancestral patterning, it's probably, until that really aligns with source. And it's like, oh, there is perfection here. Perfection is here now. It already is. It takes a lot of stress out, then it doesn't matter so much like externally, because internally, like that's already here. But if we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, whatever these, little sayings we have all over the place are, and we want to like perfect, to perform, to be liked and loved and accepted and like approved socially, then like that's overwhelm as heck, that's stressful. That'll wear and tear and drain the adrenals out. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of went off there in a lot of directions, but
no, it's all interconnected. So I think in closing, for me, we always have a choice at the end of the day. And this is, again, a whole other episode in regards to choice. But we have a choice to be self-aware and to recognize where overwhelm tends to impact our lives. And then we have a choice to know thyself and understand where on the spectrum the transmutation occurs, right? So the unhealthy to the healthy. And absolutely, you can take unhealthy overwhelm and transmute it into healthy. That's just, again, a personal journey and a personal process. But for me, the transmutation process is self-awareness, choosing, but also giving it to God. It's a saying, giving it to Great Spirit. Again, whatever that looks like for each personal individual, as far as Great Spirit or God.
I've heard you say that so much recently.
Give it to God.
This is just like, yeah, it's beautiful. It's
at the end of, yeah, because I'm a controller. I'm a perfectionist. I like things perfect. I'm a doer. I'm a list maker. I'm all these things. I got a lot of fire in me. I got a lot of earth in me. I got a lot of drive. And these are all beautiful things, but they can become unhealthy for me. Even the perfectionism, like you said, there's a beauty to it, but it can. So this is deeply personal in a way, because it's work that I've been doing most of my life, and that I continually have to do. It's not like, oh, I've transmuted and I'm good, I'm in 5D and it's gone, no way. I continuously oscillate on this spectrum, right? From this end to this end. And that's why the self-awareness and the recognition are so powerful. But I think since, the past journey, the journey of the past year, my saying has kind of become give it to God or give it to Great Spirit, because I don't have control. And that's one thing that I've really recognized. I have control over how I choose, but I don't have control always about what I'm affected by, or what comes into my life, what challenges me. But I do have a choice of how I react to it. And so this kind of like trust and faith in that which is greater has been a saving grace for me at the end of the day. And so, relinquishing control is a big one, and knowing thyself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Giving so much thanks, like each and every day because like if we're overwhelmed, we're probably having like abundance blockages. Like we're hitting our edges. It's like there's so much. Like look at how many opportunities we have. Like, and it's like, what are we running around? We're like in a car. We're, thank you for the car. Thank you for like just being able to have money to put gas in the car. Like for this like idea to even like go to the grocery store and get that produce and be stocked in my fridge. And I can even have that abundance. It's like, oh my gosh, like that's a big transmutation piece too, is like sometimes the overwhelm. It's like, thank you for this abundance of clients. Like I have so many, I'm busting at the seams. Like this is an amazing thing, And so it might be hitting these edges of abundance and like, how much we have, and like shifting from overwhelm to gratitude too. That's a shortcut to 5D. It's just like, whoo, thank you. Like, thank you, Great Spirit. Thank you, God. Like, thank you, Source, for just this amazing moment of just like, whoa, like being alive on earth right now in this body is like, there's a lot happening. And like, thank you for this opportunity for just feeling it, So there's that gratitude that brings the grace in as well. Yeah, that's a big.
That's amazing. Yeah, good call on that one.
Yeah, so good. I'm so happy we talked about this one today. It's so interesting how we really try to keep these conversations just present with what is for us. And this is what was like just right on the surface. We're like, okay, let's hit play, let's do it. So so grateful to be in this conversation with you, Linz.
Love you, girl. So grateful to be in this conversation with you. And everybody, please like, share, subscribe if you feel so inspired, and comment below. Share your stories with us. Comments, we'll read them all, we'll respond, and we appreciate your time. Much love.
Love.